Yeah, thank you very much for that, Bikram, and thank you to the organisers for this event as well. And thank you to the other speakers who, as you said, Bikram, many of whom contributed to the issue. Obviously, I'm biased as I edited it, but I think it's very, very good and very, very timely and important. And so I thought I would start by talking slightly about what some of the motivation behind putting the issue together was, and touching on a kind of few of the themes that I think will be explored in more detail by other speakers today. I think, predicting the future exactly is a fool's errand, but I think we can already say with confidence that October the 7th and everything that's happened since has caused fundamental changes in the world that are probably irreversible. And I think one thing it's done particularly is, in differing and kind of interlinked ways, it's magnified, clarified, and in some cases accelerated pre-existing issues and trends and phenomenon. So one thing that I wanted to mention quickly today, and was definitely in my mind, both with the initial idea for the issue, but also kind of as it came together, is I think what the impact that it's caused has provided an opportunity for the Palestine solidarity movement in the West. In that specifically, because I think what October the 7th and the impact of it and Israel's genocide unleashed after it has done, has made it clearer perhaps than ever before that a lot of the solidarity expressed in the West with and for Palestine is often for a kind of abstract notion of Palestine, and almost at times, I think, kind of fantasy Palestine that is divorced from the material reality of the situation and ignores, kind of talks over, and sometimes outright opposes very often the forces actually fighting for the Palestinian cause. And among other things, I think places too much emphasis on the Israel lobby as the explanation for the US and the collective West support for Israel. And that's something which, for example, Max's piece in the issue is one of the things that he speaks about. And I think this attitude is revealed in a number of ways. I think one is not unanimous, nothing I'm saying is unanimous, but I think is common, is the attitude towards armed struggle, in which it's quite rarely supported. It's often dismissed as pointless, and something, for example, that I speak about in the interview with Abdul Jawad Amar in the issue is that people are very, very reluctant to acknowledge that armed struggle on behalf of the Palestinians has political aims and is part of a broader, long-standing strategy that, although it does not come without huge cost, is effective. And that's something, for example, that Bikram's piece in the magazines speaks about in detail and very cogently and I would say encouragingly about the kind of the military aspect and the developments there. Occasionally, people who are supposedly in solidarity with Palestine will replicate the terminology and the judgments and the language of, for example, Human Rights Watch and Amnesty, which has referred to acts of armed resistance by the Palestinians as war crimes, for example, and equates directly the violence of Israel with resistance of the Palestinians. And I think Lara and Bana might talk a little bit about the limitations of that, the human rights framing and the kind of NGO, the steady increasing NGO influence in the movement that has definitely been a part of this rejection of armed struggle. Another thing I think that events, both October 7th and events since, have shown is how untenable this completely dismissive position of many have towards the axis of resistance. kind of just either completely ignoring it or disparaging it as a so-called axis of resistance that somehow uses the Palestinians as pawns, or the Palestinians are somehow being duped by Iran or whoever it is. But I think more often than not, those relationships are actually just ignored, or were. And that position was already dishonest and I think absurd, but I think it's increasingly untenable because not only before it, but especially after it, the leaders of the Palestinian resistance are very clear about the forces and the states that help them. And we're seeing that coordination, that very, very close coordination and collaboration, we're seeing it in front of our eyes. So it can no longer be downplayed and ignored to the extent that it has been without, I think, losing credibility, frankly. And for example, that's something that me and Amal Saad, there's a transcript of an interview that I did with Amal that we did, I think, in November, just after one of Hassan Nasrallah's speeches. But it's about more broadly about the axis of resistance, the connection between Hezbollah and the Palestinian cause. So I would definitely recommend reading or listening to that. That was on East is a podcast, so you can listen to it as well. Another big issue that I think has become it was already there, but really come sharply into light, is how so often solidarity in the West, the way in which Palestine is spoken about, it's completely abstracted from the broader context of US imperialism. And again, like I said, there's this heavy reliance on the Israel lobby as the kind of sole explanation for why the West, particularly the US and the UK, supports Israel. Or, for example, in the case of Germany, which is very much relevant now, this kind of simplistic and misleading notion that what Germany's position is dictated because of a position of guilt, as if, foreign policy is made on the basis of guilt. I won't elaborate on that, but I think the broader point is that the direct connection to the broader imperialist structure is now so stark and so clear that, again, I think to talk about Palestine without acknowledging that and engaging with that, it's not tenable, basically. And again, that's something that Max has written about. And then I think the other thing I tried to do with this issue, and I've tried to do with lots of things that I've either written or published, is try and place the question of solidarity with Palestine and analysis of Palestine in the historical context of analysis and writing that has already been written, and I think in many cases underappreciated or pushed down or intentionally ignored in some ways, and how kind of accurate much of that analysis is. Whether it's the Afro-Asian Writers Organization, in which there's a piece in the issue about, and their analysis of the direct connection between Israel and neocolonialism and imperialism, or the analysis of George Habash, for example. There's a speech by George Habash in the magazine, which is extremely relevant. So I guess what kind of coalesces and what brings a lot of these things together is an effort to try and move people away, not in a way that is castigating people needlessly, but trying to bring people away from this kind of abstract fantasy Palestine that is often propagated, I think, intentionally and not, to the actual material and historical reality of the situation, and why what's happening is happening, who is trying to stop it, who is facilitating it, and move away from simplistic explanations of the Israel lobby or guilt, for example, in the case of Germany. And I think what this moment does, I think it's hard to feel kind of positive or optimistic about things generally, given the ongoing horror. Although, as I've said in other places, I do believe that Israel is in a very, very bad position, which is very encouraging. But to take it back to kind of the solidarity movement, so kind of external to Palestine itself, I think this does present an opportunity to kind of move people away from this abstract notion of solidarity, which I think very often can lead to notions of kind of sympathy for victims, and becomes a kind of moral sentiment of, oh, this is terrible, and can occasionally be kind of patronizing towards the Palestinians, kind of move away from that to the real, to the concrete. And I think by doing that, it can lead to kind of empathy rather than sympathy. And so it becomes a kind of informed political stance rather than a moral sentiment that this is terrible. You know, obviously it is terrible, but we've got to go beyond this is terrible. You know, Israel is terrible. It's more the question, the more urgent and pressing questions are, how can it be stopped? Who are the forces that are actually working to stop it, etc. And given what we all know is happening, these are kind of crucial, urgent questions. And so we can't afford to be content with vague, abstract notions of solidarity. And kind of, you know, and obviously a magazine issue is not going to solve this, but that's some of the thinking. And I think most of my collaborators in the issue would agree that that was kind of one of the intentions with our writing and generally what we're trying to do. Yeah, I think that's probably enough. Thank you again, Bikram, everyone, and to all the contributors, and I'm looking forward to hearing your comments. Thank you.
I'm Michael Hudson. I'm appearing here for the International Manifesto Group. If you like this video and ones like it, please subscribe. For more information, go to the address on the screen.